Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another logic video. Today, we're going to be covering the subject of how to make a fire, or potentially anything, that repels enemies in Dreams, by the way, just in case you were confused if this was Unreal Engine, because it looks so similar. But anyway. Yes, what were we gonna do? Oh yes, starting with the enemy, you're gonna need a basic follow behavior. So, open up, scope in with L1 and X, and open up the chip with L1 and X. Stamp out a microchip. I guess we could just call this logic, because sometimes I don't know what to call the container for all these gizmos. Sometimes I call it core logic, sometimes it's logic. It's sort of something you figure out when the system is done. And then stamp out a chip called follow. And this is your basic follow behavior. It's a follower set to 2.0 speed, 100% strength, 50% dampening so he doesn't float if he gets pushed off a cliff. And he follows a tag labeled player, which I've put in this first-person puppet, which you can just get off the Dreams, search universe or whatever. I forget what it's called, the Dreamiverse? Whatever it is, though. If you want to find it, go search and go up to Community Assets and just type in first-person puppet. And you should find this thing. I don't tend to use other people's logic, but in this case it's expedient, because, I'd have to make a new system right now. But if I was making a game, I'd probably build my own. I don't know, that's how I prefer to do it. Well, there is one other thing I should mention. This enemy has a minimum distance at which he will engage with the player. So when the player gets about this close within this zone, he'll stop following. And presumably he'd have some attacks that he could use. But I have not given him any attacks, because I don't think it's entirely useful to what we're talking about. I've also set a maximum distance for when he can follow you, which also doesn't really matter, because our level is tiny. But, yeah. I've also set his strength to Y very low, because I don't want him floating around when you're, jumping or whatever, he'll float up in the air. But it is ever so slight, so that he'll follow you up cliffs, maybe, and, just kind of stay in range of you. And we've also got a look-at rotator, also set to follow the player, which, this is the tag right here. I've already shown it to you. Right about there, where the player's head is. And we've set it to 100% rotation strength and overall dampening. Rotation speed, 180, doesn't really have to be faster than that, to be honest. And a maximum distance. I don't really think we'll have any problems with this. You probably don't need to increase the minimum distance, it'll be fine. Next, I've copied this chip and relabeled it to flee, and I've made it red, which if you want to change the color, just press L1 and square, and dipsy doodle, you can change the color. And the only minor alterations I've made is the follower now is changed to flee. The zone is reduced so that, once he gets outside this zone, he'll stop fleeing whatever object it is he's supposed to flee. And I've also gotten rid of the minimum distance completely. And the speed is reduced to 3.1, so he'll be kind of slowly running off. Or maybe he'll be sped up, actually. That might be faster than the base distance. Yeah, it's faster than how he follows. And the tag he flees from is called fire instead of player. And I put the fire tag inside all flames. I'll show you that in a little bit. And this thing still points at the player, but honestly, if you wanted it to point at fire, it would work. I think I'll have it point at the player so that he's always kind of looking at you when he runs away. Nothing about that's changed, really. I've also set it to default be powered off, which you can just do by tapping X if you want to, you know, turn it off. And I've got this little chip down here called Torch, which houses a tag called Torch right here at the center of the creature, connected to a node with a NOT gate connected to its power, which you can access through L1 and square. Take the NOT gate, stick it in the power, and the node is connected to a timeline called Flee, set to play once, and there is a switch on the timeline connected to the NOT gate to prevent playback. So this thing will not restart until it has reached the end of this switch's duration. On this timeline, I have an animation for the creature flinching, you know, to make it seem like it's afraid. Also added a little sound effect so that the creature, you know when it's scared. And I've got an action recorder that shuts off the follow chip and turns on the flee chip. And that's pretty much it. Now, if you had attacks, you would probably also want to shut those off with this. They would be inside a separate chip, I imagine. And you would want them completely shut off so that he wouldn't attack during this phase. I mean, depending on what kind of game you want, maybe you would want him to attack. But if he was to attack while fleeing, I would advise putting your animation keyframe within a timeline set to sustain within this timeline, and connecting a switch to that so that you could shut off the power in order for him to briefly attack and then resume his fleeing animation. But as it stands, we're not doing that today. Just thought I'd mention it real quick for the sake of, you know, if you decide to do that. But anyway, what was I talking about? Oh, yes. That's pretty much all there is to talk about the creature. I guess I should mention that he has a walking speed of, 2.0 and 2.8 run speed. I don't really want him to run much at all. 25% acceleration and deacceleration speed. That kind of figures into how fast he moves. Now here, I've stamped out a block, a white sculpt, which I have made invisible and non-collidable, and I've also gone to the tools and I've reduced the detail a bit because it's not really going to be seen. Why would it have to be high detail anyway? I've added a crackling fire sound effect with a auto 3D panning zone, I guess you'd call it. And I've got a tag on here labeled fire, which if you recall, he flees from things called fire. Or at least tags called fire. It also has a zone called torch, so that when he gets within this zone, the tag which I have placed in here automatically triggers the playing of the timeline. Or the sequence, as it were. And that's pretty much it for the static fire. I've also added a torch to the player, which you can turn on and off with this switch. But basically, he'll just hold the torch aloft, and he's got a little zone around himself, similar to the fire. He's got a crackling sound effect, and he's got this little tag, although it should be moved over to the player, ideally, so that it'll want to get away from that. And what else? I think that's just about everything. Let's go ahead and watch the magic unfold. I've also added a little filter effect, which I turned off during the explanation section. Just makes it a little more stylistic, I guess. And there's him retreating from the fire. He'll retreat to a certain distance before stopping and then just standing there. Then he'll resume his chase. And now we're going to go up to him. And you'll see he will consistently flee from us for a little while. Now, as long as you set the switch to be slightly shorter than the duration of the action, you don't have to worry about him, you know, not fleeing from you for a brief period. He will consistently flee as long as you're within range. And you could do this with just about anything. For instance, if you wanted a flashlight, I don't really have one, but if you did, all you'd have to do is create a cone for the flashlight's light that goes out, and it's called torch or whatever it is that makes him flee. And it would do that, but yeah, we're not working with a flashlight. But this is just how to deter enemies in general. Now, if he had some kind of follow behavior, you know, like if you wanted him to patrol an area or something, you could have him go back to doing that as a separate mechanic. But I'm just talking about the most basic form of deterrent for an enemy. Anyway, I hope you found this illuminating and useful. I believe it was a request from a fan, so hopefully they'll be putting a game together with this knowledge in mind. Thanks for watching. If you have any thoughts, leave a comment, and if you enjoyed the video, leave a like. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you don't miss future videos. That's all for now. Goodbye.